All right, so the final item for today is this group, the Taliban. Where does the Taliban come from, and what ultimately is going to be the American response to that? The easiest way to do that is to look at it from the realm of the three basic questions. Why does the Taliban come to power? Why does the U.S. kick them out? And then what is the ultimate problem? First question: why does the Taliban come to power? What we already know. There's been a civil war going on since the end of the Soviet Afghan war. The Mujahideen are the group that is really trying to gain power here. And they're using US backed modern weapons to fight this. They're not showing really any kind of consideration for civilians. This is all happening in public places. This isn't a situation where there's battlefields, and the fighting is only happening on the battlefields. This is happening everywhere, and they're using these modern weapons to gain the upper hand. So through all of this, a faction of the Mujahideen is going to become more and more extremist, and that is what's going to become known as the Taliban. Right. So the Taliban, they come out of the Mujahideen and they say, "Hey, if you citizens are willing to give us absolute power, we will end all of this. We will bring about peace. We'll bring about stability. You'll be able to live how you want to live. All you have to do is just give us ultimate rule, give us absolute power." For the most part, the people are ready for peace. They feel like, you know what, it seems innocent enough. They were a part of the Mujahideen. They've got something that can since they have this strict set of codes that's going to allow for some stability. We want that, so they go ahead and go along with it. And the Taliban ultimately is going to be the group that comes to power. The only problem is there's this old saying that absolute power corrupts absolutely, meaning you can say all the things you want to, but once you get absolute power and you have the ability to do whatever you want, typically you do exactly whatever you want. It doesn't matter what you said. So even though they told people, hey, you can live how you want to live, this was the reality that people were going to wind up living with. If you do not live by the rules of the Taliban, you were going to be dealt with very, very harshly. Executions in very public places. You can see from the lines here, this is a soccer stadium. This is during a soccer game. They would have marched this person out there, announced here's what their crimes were, and executed them in front of everyone as a show of force, as a show of here's why you obey and you do whatever we tell you to do. So they're going to become this, very, very, very corrupt, very powerful extremist group that is going to rule through fear and violence. So the second question: why does the U.S. want to kick them out? Ultimately, the Taliban, because of their extremism, is going to start to attach themselves with groups like Al Qaeda. And Al Qaeda was a terrorist organization that was once again, just like the Taliban, going to have very, very extremist kind of views, and ultimately are going to be led by a guy by the name of Osama bin Laden. If you want to see something kind of crazy, look back to this. This is from the Independent, which is a British newspaper, actually praising Osama bin Laden for his role in the Soviet-Afghan War and coming in and leading the people. Um, Now we look at him as the ultimate terrorist. He's the guy that ultimately in 2001 is um, going to put the 9/11 attacks together. So, because of the fact that the Taliban is going to start to side with groups like Al Qaeda, they're going to shelter people like Osama bin Laden, they're going to allow for terrorist camps to be in their country. That's going to be a reason for the United States to want to go in and get rid of the Taliban as a group. So, that third question then: what is the problem? The problem is all the things that have led up to this. You'll look at it, and the U.S. when we're going back into Afghanistan, um, and we're going back to basically supporting the Mujahideen, the group that had created the Taliban. We're going to go back and we're going to support the Mujahideen, regardless of all the bad things that they've done to civilians after the war. The Mujahideen is kind of like the lesser of two evils. As long as the Mujahideen are willing to get rid of the Taliban, man, that means that we'll come in and we'll do what we have to do to help you. They're still going to have access to all of that weaponry that was provided, though. So the Taliban is going to have that. Mujahideen are going to have that. It's going to make it extremely difficult. Hey, we had the chance to fix all of this when the Soviets left, and we just left. We didn't stay and educate the people. We didn't stay and collect all the weapons. We didn't stay and help put the country back together. We just kind of left. So now we're kind of villainized, and we're having to fight against that as well. Ultimately, after the war, the Soviet-Afghan war is over. Hey, if you leave, you look bad because it creates future problems. That's what we did. If you stay, you look like, hey, we're this big imperialist country, and other countries are going to ask, well, why are we involved in politics in other parts of the world? Um, so there wasn't really a good option here, but the option that we chose makes going back in that much more difficult. And we've already said, Afghanistan, graveyard of empires, so it's going to be a extremely difficult place to operate. Ultimately, what happens? The Taliban is going to be taken out of power, and the United States, we're going to try to institute a democratic form of government. But they're Garigan. We're not getting the message. We're not learning the lessons because it's still a place of tribal and village ties. It's still a place that hadn't experienced democracy before. It's still a place that's very, very divided. So, what does the future look like there? It's just really, really difficult to say.